welcome to Talent Matters, the most engaging, creative, exciting, progressive podcast that you'll listen to, presented by someone called Dave, whose company rhymes with Wave. No, Dave, my company is Wave, so it rhymes. So we're okay, unless there is maybe a podcaster that is also called Dave, whose company talks about raves or something or other. Don't know, but the jokes don't get any better. I'm sorry, anyone that watches this, they know that the jokes are just dreadful. But anyway, let's not worry about that. It's not a comedy podcast. We talk about very, very serious things here. And today we are going to talk about flexible working. So I was thinking a little bit about flexible working and wondering if, one, I was a little bit late to the party with this topic, because it seems as though a lot of people have covered it and kind of talked about it to death. But actually, it seems as though the idea of flexible working constantly is evolving and keeps changing. When we think about COVID, we all kind of packed up, went home, worked from home, and then no one wanted to go back to the office. Then everybody kind of then did want to go back to the office, and companies said they were never going to have an office again, suddenly decided they were going to have an office. And now we see some employers are now demanding and requiring people to come back 5 days a week or whatever it is. So I don't think we're late to the party on this, but who better to discuss this with and get stuck into this with than Juliet Turnbull, MD of 2 to 3 Days. If you don't know the website, 2to3days.com, Google it now. So increase some traffic for Juliet, but go and have a look at it. I'm sure she can explain what the website does a little bit better than me. So Juliet, welcome. Hello.
Hello, thank you.
Waffly intro from me.
Your jokes are bad, Dave.
They're really bad.
You need a book of bad dad jokes, I think.
Yeah, but then even then I would just deliver them dreadfully. So
Okay.
I suppose you just have to deal with the cards that you dealt with.
You have to roll with the waves.
Roll with the waves.
Roll with the waves.
I should have said that at the start, shouldn't I? But how are you? You doing okay?
Yeah, I'm well, thank you. Yeah, really good.
That's good. So 2 to 3 days.
Yeah.
For those people who haven't instantly Googled it, and if you're watching or listening, what is it?
What is it? It's my third child. It's my baby. It's my company that I set up back in the dark ages, Dave, of 2015, when flexible working was a dirty word. I'm a woman on a mission to help solve a social and economic problem in our country, which is connect highly capable women to employers who want to employ them to work flexibly so that they can integrate work into their lives. So we're an interesting business. We're a medley of an online community of highly capable women. And then we are a traditional job board. So recruiters and employers can post their job vacancies directly to this very concentrated group of women who want to apply for their jobs. And we are growing and nurturing that community by giving them support and inspiration from employers so that they can put their best self forwards and get the job.
Super. And I love the name, by the way.
Well, it's interesting. The name in itself is quite a good story, in the fact that I came up with it when I was thinking about building another business called Having Both, because I was a business coach in my previous life, and I strongly believe with every bone in my body that women predominantly, which is what I'm championing, should be able to integrate work into their lives. I believe you can have both, but I don't think you can have it all. And I came up with a name when I was thinking about building this coaching business, because I said, what is it that people say when they want to have both? And they say they want to work 2 to 3 days. And I thought, that's a good name. And it is what people say. When I was a business coach, MDs of companies would say, we need somebody 2 to 3 days. And people will say, I want to work 2 to 3 days. But little did I know, thanks to the pandemic, that it would become part of everybody's lexicon when they're going, oh, 2 to 3 days in the office, 2 to 3 days at home, 2 to 3 days. And I'm like,
it's great. Yeah. I think it really encapsulates, a lot of people's, women and men, it's the kind of becomes the work-life balance in itself, doesn't it? If you look at the, 5 days in the week and, 2 to 3 days working, 2 to 3 days in the office. Is it 3 days? Is it 2 days?
Yeah, well, that's my thing. I think it's all about work-life integration. I really hate the phrase work-life balance, which was manifested back in the 1970s by American coaches, because it implied that work, if you ever try and balance yourself on a seesaw or a trumpet, it's exhausting. You can't. Life is fluid, work is fluid, and therefore it's about integrating the two. And as you say, whether you're 2 to 3 days in the office or 2 to 3 days at home, it's all about the integration of the two.
Yeah, I fully agree. So where are we then with flexible working at the minute? Because the way that there seems to be, I think, a bit of a disconnect between what some of the bigger companies or just companies, what they want and are requiring versus what candidates and people want. Because there does seem to be a bit of a return to, we want you back in the office more than 2 to 3 days, sometimes, 3 days, sometimes 4. And yet whenever you talk to a human being about their, job hunt or their jobs or interviews and things, the first question we'll ask is say, would you have to go into the office? And if they say, yeah, 4 days a week, you go, ooh. And they say, yeah, I know, I'm not really sure about that. I would like to go in 2 to 3 days maximum or whatever. So it seems as though maybe candidates want it, but is there a little bit of a return to companies dragging their feet a little bit? With this?
I think we take a step back. We're in a period of transition. So pre-pandemic and everybody thought I was on the zeitgeist when I launched my business 8 years ago. And to be honest, Dave, it was me, and I'm old enough to say this, it was me, John Wayne, and a whole load of tumbleweed 8 years ago. So then the pandemic happened, which did more to shift the way we work. It's the biggest shift that's happened since World War II. So we have to sort of look at the historical timeline. So we're like in a washing cycle at the moment. The period of transition is happening. And so within that, you're going to have the early adopters, and then you're going to have the Luddites. And you've got that real tension. You've got the younger generations that are coming through, the millennials and the Gen Z, who are just saying, no, I've seen that my parents are knackered. They're burnt out. I don't want that sort of life. You've still got the baby boomers and even the older men and women who are still leading the UK PLC, who have been brought up in a different way of working, where it was very much binary. Typically men went to work and women stayed at home. You've now got more women coming out of university education than men, and that's only set to rise. So we're in a really interesting period of change. You could say it's turbulent, it's change, and human beings don't like change. So we automatically resist change, but it's happened. And thanks to the pandemic, even though that was brutal for women, as I said, it's done more to shift everything. And now you've got this state of tension. And as you say, it seems like there's an English-Chinese conversation going on between employers and employees. A recent Slack survey said that 97% of employees want to work flexibly when they work, and 80% about where they work. And then, as you say, there's this tension with companies wanting employees to come back, and whether it's 2 to 3 days in the office or 2 to 3 days at home. But I think one thing that's is definite. Hybrid working, and that even wasn't a word. I've been working hybrid styling for 20 years, but that word, wasn't even our lexicon 3 years ago.
It was strange, wasn't it? A few years ago, if you said you worked from home, you get sort of those thoughts of those jobs that you used to be able to get where you'd stuff envelopes, and you'd have to work from home, and you'd have to seal 3,000 envelopes in a day or whatever. It just wasn't a thing, was it?
No, it's not a thing. But we've got the biggest labor crisis in this country that's ever known, and so you've just got this natural tension point, and some companies are embracing it better than others, but it's here to stay. And we're going to see it evolve, but it's definitely, flexible working is not going. And we've got, we want to get deeper into the gender equality issues. You've got to get the women back. It then gets to a problem with childcare that's still seen as women's work. But we all have, lots of men and women have children. We have elderly care. Life has got to be taken care of. And it can no longer, and the demands on us as individuals, whether it's in our work or home life, is far more demanding than it was for our parents and our grandparents. And with, digitalization, it means we have an always on culture. And therefore, the only way it's going to go is that we've got to get better and clearer at integrating work into our lives and creating a culture of self-responsibility, so that you are trusted to do the work and trusted to look after your family, and and not abuse the system.
Yeah. And of course, flexible working isn't just talking, getting stuck on one track in terms of whether or not you can work remotely or not, is it? I mean, there are so many different types of flexible working in terms of, the hours that you work.
Yeah.
Flexible, where you work is flexible. The skills that the type of role that you do. Yeah. Again, job sharing, is.
Yeah, there are so many. Yeah, there are so many. I think one of the tension points is that jobs are being advertised as full-time flexible, and that's not the same as part-time work, even though part-time work is a subsection of flexible working. So where you have got tension, and I see this, and funnily enough, only this week, a very senior woman in the travel and leisure industry who's blimmin' good at what she does, she needs some flexibility. She wants to be able to take her kids to school and pick them up. And if I recall correctly, they're even teenagers. So that she's even got from about sort of 9 o'clock in the morning till about 4:30, 5 o'clock. But she needs that bit of flexibility. She's applying for work, and then she can do the job. She emailed me this week saying, I can do the job with my hands down, but the company won't take me on because I need some sort of flexibility. So I think there's a fear factor, and there's a misunderstanding about what we mean by flexible working. And some companies are offering flexible working, but they're not really walking their talk, and they're not following it through with not just their policies and their processes and their systems in their organization, but even more importantly, the culture of their organization. It comes from the leadership. There's a very interesting survey that's come out this week by the global consultancy firm DDI on diversity and equity and inclusion, and it's saying that 18% less senior leaders are taking D&I and their culture seriously. That shines through in the organization, and people leave because they can't show up and be trusted to do their work.
And is that because when you were talking about, and conscious not to lay this at a generation's, doorstep, but, you mentioned earlier that you got, baby boomers who are still, the kind of the top of the tree in these companies, and they have a fixed view. on how things should be. But, you know, I don't really want to kind of blame a generation, but so why are companies, in that example that you gave and the examples that I hear, why are companies dragging their feet? They're just scared of change?
Well, it's complex. I think it's a combination of things. It has to fundamentally come from the senior leadership. If you don't have the buy-in from the leaders, then your managers and your employees are going to struggle. It's not always the case, but quite often they might have a wife who's a stay-at-home wife, who therefore affects the way they live their life, and their wife doesn't work, and their partner, then they don't see it. They don't see the tension. They don't see the bias because of their privilege, and they don't see it as a problem because it suits them. You've also got hiring managers are not trained, supported, encouraged to talk about how the job can be done flexibly. So if they're not supported, then they're not going to ask the question because they've got to do their job, which I think has happened in this case. Again, yesterday I spoke to somebody who, one of the challenges you've got, especially for the age group of women that 2 to 3 days attracts, which is typically between the age of 33 and 55, quite often recruiters are quite young. That it attracts a generation in their 20s and 30s, especially in the bigger organizations. They don't know how to ask the questions of people that are older than them, that might be old enough to be their parents or their, generation above. That they're quite intimidated, so they don't ask the questions to find the nuggets of, how you can do the work. And it comes back to the culture again. And mindset, and we are human beings resist change as well, so it's a combination of factors.
Maybe an element of this is how we've always done it, that old-fashioned kind of saying where why would we change it? We've always done it like this and it worked.
It worked, it worked, and the belief that and managers on the whole are lazy. If you have everybody in the office, it's much easier to manage by seeing people rather than, and you're busy, you've got big targets, you've got pressures under you. It's much easier, and you're not trained to be managers. Quite often people get promoted above their pay grade into a managerial role, but then they're not supported or trained to become really good managers. Therefore, it's much easier to get them back into the office. Because of course it does. If you've got people on different schedules, and you've got people in the office and at home and in different work patterns, of course that creates more logistical, organizational work than if everybody's just bunged in the same room 9 till 5 to get on with it. Yeah. But that doesn't mean to say you're being productive and creative.
Sometimes also you've got IT issues and problems in terms of getting people onto certain networks and things like that. If people have got old systems in place as well, sometimes the infrastructure from a technology point of view, obviously it exists, but some, especially bigger businesses, may have, they might still have the server in the corner.
I think the pandemic, I don't think you would have survived the pandemic if you hadn't invested in the technology. I think that is taken care of. And if you're going to future-proof your business, everybody's having to invest in technology of some description. So digital transformation has burst that full-time in the office bubble forever.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
So what do you, like, most of the people that listen to this and watch this are recruitment businesses, recruitment consultants. Have you got any advice as to how they may be able to convince their client, who may fall into the category of the people that we've just been talking about, maybe dragging their feet? How do they convince their client to look at flexible options when they've delivered a fairly rigid brief to them. Have you got any advice or ideas how they might be able to convince them to take a candidate that wants to work 2 to 3 days rather than 5 days in the office?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Dave. And I think, I'm not a recruiter from background. And so I've been observing and learning the recruitment industry for these last few years. And I think part of the resistance lies in how systemically the recruitment, which is a £39 billion industry, is set up, which is, broadly speaking, as you all know, and your audience will know even better than me, it's first, it's first past the post system of the best candidate, and then you're rewarded on a percentage of the full-time salary. So that's the crux. You're in business to make money, and when your remuneration is on a percentage of the full-time salary, that lies the problem, because anything less, you're going to get paid less money. So it then comes back to the intent of the individual and the company. What's their desire? And if they're not wedded or interested in changing the status quo, then you're going to get latent resistance within the recruitment industry. So it comes down to the individual companies and individuals wanting to do things differently. And if they do, then there is only, in my mind, 2 key questions that they have to ask their client. The first question is, hey, client, if I put the best person for this job in front of you and they wanted to work flexibly, would you consider them, client? And the client says, yes, I would. So you're 50% of the way there. The second question is, will you pay me the same fee? Because if the client says yes to those, then you've automatically opened up your database of candidates to a whole host of men and women that before you would have just excluded. And I speak to them every single day of the week when the candidates tell me that recruiters just don't even put them on their books. And as soon as they want to work flexibly, they just discount them, not interested. And so then what happens is the recruiters do not have a database of candidates that want to work flexibly, because all they do is attract candidates that want to stay working full time, or say they do. So you're perpetuating the vicious circle. And then they'll say to clients, well, we can't find anybody. Well, that's because they haven't put them on their database, because they have discounted them as soon as they've said we want to work flexibly.
That's really interesting. I hadn't considered that point actually in relation to the fees. And I wonder how many clients would be prepared to pay that fee, because they would see it as, well, you're charging me, double because they're only working 2 to 3 days, which is probably the wrong.
Yeah, but then I think it's a haggle. That's why it comes back to the intent of the individual, because if you genuinely care about putting the best person in front of your getting the job, then, keep the math simple. If it's $100,000 role and they're working 4 days, then you're going to get $80,000. You're going to get, say, 25% of the $80,000. So you're going to get $20,000 rather than 25. You could say, okay, we've lost out on $5,000, but the client's going to love us because we put Sophie or Bob in for that job and they're just brilliant. And then they're going to see that what they're able to do will come back and work with you again. Now, obviously, the contingency model, the whole model, it depends on the model you're working with. But I think, which is why it comes back to the impersonal intent, if you want to take a little bit more time and invest in the future of your business, then I would encourage you to take on candidates who quite often, once you have the conversation with the client, they might be able to work more days or appease the client that they can get the job done. Or it might end up being a job share. You just don't know, but you've got to want to invest in that relationship with the client.
Yeah. I think with some recruiters, the way that I had thought about it would be that, the conversation, switches quite quickly to the difficulty that they're going to have to try and find a candidate that will work in that space, whatever that particular role is. Because sometimes, I guess one of the hardest things that I hear from recruiters is clients being overly ambitious with who they can get for the money that they're paying. And then you chuck in a requirement for them to be in the office 5 days a week. And that I suppose that it comes down to the relationship that the recruiter has with the client to be able to say, you're just not going to be able to find someone to come to the office 5 days a week for X £1,000 a year. Have you considered, for that money, you would get someone 2 to 3 days a week? And so would you be prepared to look at that? And sometimes that, the outcome, the objectives of that role could be achieved by someone who is on working 2 to 3 days and paid, pro rata, better than someone trying to get someone on a full-time wage. But the challenge is when the client then says, no, and if you won't find me this person, I've got 10 other recruiters that ringing me who have said that they will. And so it takes a bit of confidence in the industry you're recruiting in to be able to have that conversation with the client. So I guess it's intent, isn't it? Like
it's the intent, and it's a symbiotic relationship. You've got to become an enlightened client. You've got to be able to see that doing the same thing over and over and again is not going to change the demographic of your staff. And as recruiters, you've got to have, as you say, the confidence to push back and challenge your clients. And the easiest way to do that, in a way, or part of the way, is to make sure that you are not discounting those men and women who are talking to you and saying, I want to work flexibly. You've got to make sure you've got that data, those candidates on your database, so that you can turn around and say, look, he or she is bloody good at this job. They need this sort of flexibility. Don't discount them. Have an interview with them.
Yeah.
So it's it's a bit of both. And for the larger organizations, they are under more and more, increasingly so, regulatory pressure, societal pressure to address their gender equality, and women are leaving in their droves because of the lack of flexibility, and especially the men of the younger generations, they want it too. So it is happening. So it's incumbent upon clients and recruiters to push back.
So you have to get on board or you'll be left behind.
It's happening,
So where's it going then? I mean, we've seen, as you said, you described us as being in a washing machine on a cycle. Where does the cycle end? How much more will we evolve? I don't know if this is a question of realistically, where is it going to end, or where kind of could it end or get to in a perfect world? Where is flexible working going to evolve to?
I'd like to think that we will get to a stage where, like everything, it will find its flow. We need to be, let's break it down. Where we work, we are social beings at the end of the day, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. Human beings are social creatures. And therefore, where we work, it is important that we have that social interaction. And the best place for that to happen is in an office. Or some sort of co-working space, but in an office where you can be with other people. We need those water cooler moments. We need the fizz and crackle of other human beings. All of us working in our back bedrooms across the UK is not good for our mental well-being. It's not good for the vitality of business, and we all need to work. But we don't need to be in the office all the time. We also relish our thinking time, our quiet time, when we need to get on with stuff. And of course, some jobs lend themselves more to that than others. If you're a client-facing role, then of course you've got to be out with the clients. You're not going to sell just sitting in your back office. When we work, I think that's a big thing. Some people enjoy working early in the morning. Some people enjoy working at night. Some people enjoy working at a Saturday morning. I think the Monday to Friday restriction is going to change because, and I think that is brilliant. And that allows integration. That allows parents to drop their kids off from school and pick them up. It allows people to go and, whether it's run a marathon or go to a painting class with their kids or whatever on a Friday afternoon, and then they might prefer to work Saturday morning. It doesn't matter. The one thing that unites us all is we all have the same amount of time, 24 hours in a day, 365 days of the year. It's how we choose to spend our time and when and how we choose to do it. And it's about taking self-responsibility for when we get the work done. If you don't turn up and do your job and you don't deliver the results, then you deserve to lose your job. But if you're performing, then why should it matter when and how you do your job? And it comes down to team effort. If you're working on a big corporate deal, an IPO sale or something, you've all got to come together and you've got to work as a team to get that deal done. But we also know that there are quieter times, or if you're in accountancy, we all know that the year end is horrendous and you've all got to work harder and longer hours. But then we also know that come June and July and August, it's a much quieter time. So you have to respond to the peaks and the troughs of your industry and your sector. If you're somebody that enjoys the hospitality industry and you like front facing and being at the front of a hotel, then you will work differently to somebody who's an auditor. And we're different folks for different strokes. We all like different jobs and we all need each other. We all have a role to play in the circle of working life. So I'm sort of lost my train of thought now, but so I think that is naturally going to evolve. Digitalization is only going to accelerate that. And we've also got an aging population. I think it's sort of like by 2000 in 5 years' time, the retirement age is 67, then it goes up to 68. We're going to be working a long time and we've got an aging population. We're going to have to work a lot longer than our parents did and our grandparents did. And so, but as you get older, you have more responsibilities for other human beings, whether that's the younger generation or the older generation. And so the more we can integrate work into our lives, the easier it's going to be for everybody, for society and economy to coexist. I think we'll see the way we run city centres will change. All these big office buildings, I don't think it'd be unsurprising that you won't have flats and restaurants above, Goldman Sachs or whatever. And, Canary Wharf will look different to the way it does today. And that's a good thing because people don't want to have to do the massive commute. So I think it's all evolving. And I think the key is to stay open, not closed. So it comes back to your earlier question about recruiters. You need to stay open and you need to encourage your clients to stay open and challenge the status quo because it's breaking. It's not working.
I think that's it, isn't it? It's almost coming back to that thing of saying, not accepting that this is the way that we've always done it. If there isn't enough of a qualified answer for that question, then be open to look at other things and to change it. And if it doesn't work straight away, then you can change.
To adapt and not to change. And
dynamic and adapting, I think, is really.
And if I know you've got to pay the bills, but there are enough companies out there who are getting more and more enlightened. I speak to them every day of the week. And at the end of the day, your company can only survive if you have really good people. And you've got to have motivated people. And people who are happy at work are loyal and they work hard. And thanks to technology, you no longer have to be present in your office. It's just an urban myth. You just don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're getting racing towards the end. We've gone through the important stuff, but equally important is our foodie question. So same question to that I normally ask to people around. If you want to put on a show, you're taking some people out, you're going to take them out to a restaurant, where you're going to take them. If you don't take them out and you decide to cook, what are you cooking? And what would be on the menu? So which are you taking them out, or are you cooking in?
Dave, I'm an absolute foodie, so this is an easy question for me, and I can get even more excited about food than I can about flexible working, because
it's surprising. Everybody does. So I love in the wrong industry.
No, well, I cook from scratch every single day of my life, and I would definitely have people home. And I have two firm favorite cookbooks or chefs that I follow, which is Ottolenghi, or my real favorite at the moment is Sabrina Gayor and her book Persiana. And if I was cooking for I don't know, just to cook a really lovely meal on midweek or on a Saturday, I think my favorite meal at the moment would be one from Persiana Everyday Cookbook, which is it's really easy to make, but it's amazing. And it is it's pan-fried salmon cooked in harissa. So you have the pink of the salmon and then the red of the harissa. And then I cook this amazing fragrant rice, which is just normal basmati rice. And I fry an onion so that it helps to caramelize it. Then I add in fresh dried dill and dried chives and garlic and turmeric. And you mix that all together. And then the rice becomes sort of lightly yellow, speckled with a bit of brown and the green of the herbs. And then my absolute, oh my God, I'll start salivating. I
already am.
I love
great.
It would be green, purple sprouting, and then I make this wonderful tahini sauce that has got its oil and garlic, and then the bit that sounds a bit weird, but it's amazing, is chopped up preserved lemons. And that, I could eat that with just the tablespoon. It's to die for. But that drizzled over the green, has the green and the white, and then you have the pink and the red, and then the yellow of the rice. It's a to die for meal, and I love cooking it for friends.
Do you know what? I think that is the most descriptive that anyone has been in terms of what they would cook. I think you need your own.
I'd love. Everybody says I should have my own TV show and be championing flexible working, championing women whilst I'm cooking, and that is my happy place.
Yeah, I think you need to. Well, as and when you start it, I'll we'll take some.
You'll be one of my first guests.
Yeah, Talent Matters credit for that, as the birth of Juliet's cooking and flexible working.
Well, funny enough, I want to. Everybody wants me to start a podcast, and I'm just building a garden room, and I'm going to do it in there. And part of what I want to do is say to people, you can either come down to West Wittering, and I will cook you a meal, and then we'll do the podcast and have a walk on the beach, or if you can't be bothered, I can do it remotely. But that's when I'd love people to come down and integrate my podcast or my food, and then I'm in my happy.
Great. You have to do it, and I'm always available.
You're always available. You'll be one of my first guests. Thank you.
So that was great. We've got to the end. I think we covered some really good points there, and thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully you
was I okay?
You absolutely top notch. That was great.
Okay.
So I think we've covered some really good areas there, and it's clear that it's not a finished topic at all. It is going to run and evolve. And hopefully for our listeners and viewers, hopefully that has been useful and something for you guys to have a think about, and maybe take into your own working circumstances. So yeah, once again, thank you very much, Juliet, for coming on.
Thank you
to everybody who has been listening and watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm really sorry about the bad jokes at the start, but you know how I am now. Not funny. But do come back, and we'll hopefully see you all soon. Thanks very much. Bye.